how does the heart get its voltage from gravity? Which is the physics of enlightenment, yes? So that's where we're going with this. We have a new definition of life force. Celestine prophecy said all human interactions are about charge. We're extending that to a new definition of life force for electricians and maybe even psychologists. Life force is the ability to attract and self-organize charge. And how does it happen in an egg? The same way it happens in your heart. This is how. The egg adjusts the geometry of its lines of charge, the capacitance right here, the same way a pine cone does. Pine cone opens and closes in order to change how much voltage it gets from gravity. So this is a zero-point energy device, right? And how does it work? Here's a top-down view now of that egg, and it's a top-down view of the pine cone. It also happens to be a top-down view of your DNA and your pineal gland. And since every living biological protein is five-sided, it seems that life has something to do with this picture. Right? So, what is the solution? And now I'm going to explain to you the solution to Einstein's unified field. And you're going to understand it better than any physicist on this planet. And you're ahead of them, believe me. And it's that simple. And you can understand for yourself. Okay? So here's Einstein. Einstein is just staring down into a black hole. And he said, if I could model the geometry of infinite non-destructive compression, I'd know how to get voltage from gravity and why black holes bend time. Well, he didn't understand the geometry of self-similarity or fractality optimized by the golden mean ratio, which is then this three-dimensional fractal, the stellated dodecaecosa. He didn't understand the geometry of infinite compression, which you now understand. So now, let's ask ourselves if we understand why that makes gravity. Why is it so important for you to know how to make gravity? Because as the sun goes to its solar maximum, only the biological structures that are able to make gravity survive. Okay? That, in effect, DNA is a device for fabricating local gravity, as is your bliss. Yeah. So we're going to look at the geometry of what enables that fabrication of a gravity wave, and here's how it works. Please, this is the point of the whole evening, so I beg of you to follow me with this one, okay? Wavelength A meets wavelength B, and they have kids, wavelength C, okay? That's called conjugal relations. It's very sexy, okay? In physics, it's called phase conjugation, but the meaning in physics and the meaning in genetics is the same. The meaning is the waves must both add and multiply, because recursive adding is multiplying. It happens that only the golden mean ratio gives waves the geometry where wavelength A and wavelength B can meet and cross, making wavelength C such that A plus B equals C and A times B equals C. That's called an arithmetic and a geometric progression. Only the golden mean ratio permits that. So what happens? You get recursive adding and multiplying of the wavelengths. Well, that's pretty simple, isn't it? You get infinite non-destructive interference. Another way of saying you get infinite constructive interference. Because with that sexy conjugal relations, you got all children that fit the nest. So the kids didn't fight. Get it? Very simple. It's like family relations. Well, how is that the solution to gravity? This is very important now. This is the essence of the science of the evening. That when wavelength A and wavelength B meet, they're literally surfers. Okay? Have you ever watched a surfer when the wave is going this way and the surfer's doing this? And then he's got the crest of the crash of the wave coming this way, so he's following the lip of the curl. And when the curl collapses on the other wave, the wave velocities add and multiply, and he comes shooting out of that curl like he's been shot from a gun, right? Well, the physics of this is exactly that. Wavelength A and wavelength B in the physics of heterodyning, and I'm speaking strictly solid hard physics now, is that the wave velocities add and multiply. So wavelength A and wavelength B have children not just in wavelength but in wave velocities. The phase front of wavelength A meets the phase velocity of wavelength B, and they shoot forward a child whose wave velocity is the addition and multiplication of the parent waves. And that adding and multiplying of wave velocities produces acceleration. And so the wave right here has been pushed through the speed of light. Now, if you know anything about Einstein, you know exactly that acceleration and gravity are identical. They cannot be differentiated. If you produce acceleration, you've got gravity. Okay? So the fact is that when you pull the drain in your bathtub, when you pull the drain through the speed of light here, what you do is create the suction for charge that can go through the speed of light at the center. And that wind of charge going between frequencies through the speed of light is called gravity. Now, why did I have to go to so much trouble to do that little song and dance when you didn't even come here to be physicists? Because that is the only way to get the zipper through the wormhole of your DNA through the speed of light, called getting a soul. In other words, your DNA and your children know very well that it is fatal, and I mean fatal, to be caught below the speed of light. Therefore, they're willing to risk death, very appropriately, rather than not have the bliss that can accelerate the wave through the speed of light in the tornado up the zipper of their DNA, called getting a soul. The fringe benefits from the corporation, if in fact you get your tornado through the speed of light, called getting a soul, are you can lucid dream, bardo navigate, carry memory through death, travel in time without heavy metal, which is very embarrassing otherwise. So, in effect, the skill to get that implosion, this is the physics of fusion. This is the physics of enlightenment. This is the physics of artificial intelligence. This is the physics of wave self-organization. This is the physics of how some waves appear to become self-steering. It's wormhole physics. So here's the side view of what we just saw from the top view. The pine cone steers the waves to the point of implosion. It's called pining away, as in charging the battery of yearning in Gurdjieff, right? So this braiding process happens because you can take any two numbers and add them and get the next number forever. Or you could take any number in the progression multiplied by 1.618 and get the next number forever. 1.618 squared is 2.618, etc. That produces a geometry of a spin path or a cascade to the 0 point. That spin path, called perfect damping, the caduceus, is based on the golden mean ratio. Perfect damping in radio theory is also based on the golden mean ratio. Golden mean ratio here and golden mean ratio here. And that's a compression wave, and that's the solution to the scalar or torsional field effect. So the role of mind among waves is this. The role of mind among waves is to produce the centering force that holds the little tornado inside the next bigger tornado. And that ability to make the still point is how the violinist chooses the note. When you go to the Gurdjieff school, if you want to do the sacred gymnastic, first thing you do is put your attention in your little finger until you can feel a tingle there. The electrical force of your attention increases as you charge the battery of yearning. You actually charge the battery of your attention until you can put your center of attention in the center of the sun and steer that. And so that ability to make that spin path in the wormhole becomes the ability to self-refer, which is the Vedic definition of consciousness. So the only angle at which a wave can re-enter itself without hurting itself is the origin of self-reference, which is the definition of self-awareness. In other words, the tornado that learned how to feed itself. That's you and me. Yeah? So here's the tornado.